talked about a lot of things. We heard a lot of issues. We heard a lot of facts. Let me start out, asking you guys, what did you guys learn? What pops in your mind first if you think about what you heard from each other guys? Let's start with the lady first.
Well, I liked very much from your presentation this very smart way of structuring the past 50 years and the rise of the internet. And obviously I liked very much the end with the allegory of the caves. And also Der Weg ist das Ziel, and the two questions that came after it, because they may allow quite an interesting discussion, perhaps later. Mm-hmm. And from your presentation, I liked very much the systematic overview on all the verticals. You may also add smart cities and energy, etc. And obviously, as regulators, we have to understand the challenges that different vertical industries pose, and then see that the regulatory framework fits with new requirements. Mm-hmm. And M2M IoT obviously is also at the center of debate for the review of the electronic communications code in Brussels that is currently discussed in the trilogue.
James?
Well, Andreas, I think the thing I took from your presentation, which was excellent, at the end, you spoke about the kinds of metrics that companies can use to gauge or to shape the way that they think about data. Okay, so I'm a technology analyst. We sort of had a quick chat at one of the coffee breaks. I have a personal interest in AI and machine learning. I do a lot of that in my own time. So I'm very into the technology behind that, and I get excited about algorithms and neural networks and so on and so on. And I think it was a great reminder that actually, as you said, data has no value by itself. You need to, not just run algorithms on it, but actually understand what it is that the data can tell you, and to measure that in business terms, or society terms, or whatever that is. So I thought that was great. Cara, the thing I learned from you, and again, it's another great reminder of a big kind of phenomenon that's taking place, is the growing tension between network operators and OTTs. Okay, now you approached it from a regulatory point of view, of course. So how do we think about where that line of regulation lies? May touch on that later, but I thought that was a great point.
Mm-hmm. Andreas?
First of all, I wanted to thank the organizers for having put together an amazing day. I think that's more important than what I have to say that I have learned besides that. Secondly, I want to thank them for the socks. You all have a pair of socks. And then thirdly, what I found very interesting in Frau Schwarz-Schilling's talk was how important it is how something gets charged, like the termination fee, for instance. That I think a whole country's direction can be determined by what charges we pay for communication. When I arrived in the US, my advisor gave me a modem and said, you turn it on in the morning, you turn it off in the evening, and was free to be connected. And that spirit of there is no cost to being connected, compared to Germany in the 80s and even the 90s, where my dad's salary wouldn't have sufficed to be connected 24/7. I think that spirit, these costs you pointed out, is super important. Yeah. For James, even what you just said reminded me of Reinhold Niebuhr's prayer.
Just tell everybody who is Reinhold Niebuhr, just in case people don't know.
Theologian who I think was in a concentration camp and then managed to survive. And he said, God, grant me the ability to change what I can change, to accept what I can't change, and the wisdom to tell one from the other. So I think that probably applies to all of us, regulation and your insights. What can we change and what can we not change?
But if we go more into details, everything is changing. There's the only constant thing right now is change. Very old saying by an old Greek philosopher, and things are going to change. But if you just focus on technologies, which are right now, IoT, big data, stuff like that, how will that, will they affect that change, let's say, the interconnected business, interconnected world, how will it affect the business? So if lots of business guys here, they think in terms of money, euros, dollars, whatever. How will it affect the change? How business? What is in it for me? If I'm a business guy, what can I take out of it? Who wants to go first?
I think something that came out quite clearly today is how important security is for many applications that we've been talking about. And also whether customers will embrace certain services which may be related to data sensitivity. For that reason, in Europe, we have a strong discussion on data protection because certain services may just not be used unless there is a secure environment. And I think a lot of the technical talks today centered around that feature. So I think who will be able to make leaps there is going to has a prospect of being quite successful in a simple way and not in a terribly complicated European way, which is what the Americans always try to avoid.
Okay, we are terribly European. You live in San Francisco, so give me the American way point of view.
I think it's very interesting that in the US, we are afraid of the government, even more so after the last election. But we're not afraid of companies. I mean, what's the worst that Google can do? That actually happened to me earlier this year, that I lost my YouTube channel. It just simply disappeared. Nobody knows how. So that's about as bad as it can go. On the other hand, what's the worst the government can do? They can put you in prison. Interesting enough, in Europe, the fear of companies is very serious. People really do have genuine angst about companies. I call it Datenangst, data angst, versus the belief is that the government, they won't do all that bad things. So that actually is a very interesting change of sign, that the US, people fear the government. In Europe, people are afraid of private companies.
And the NSA.
Although I talked to somebody from an organization, Pullach, last week. And he told me that when really tricky problems happen, whether it's the Germans or the British, they all need to go and ask the Americans how to crack that key, for instance. So I didn't expect that. That on the one hand, we are afraid of the NSA. On the other hand, I think they must be pretty good, such that the BND, for instance, goes there for help.
We heard about the American point of view. We heard about a German, European point of view. You are British. You are kind of in between. So.
I hope not.
Well, technically,
I'll take that message home. That's may affect the Brexit negotiations. Okay. I think, we look at these disruptive technologies and the effect that they're having on business, and I think you can't, accept at a very first approximation, a very high level. You can't take them all as one. You need to look at them individually. And there are some which are, very mature or relatively mature now, like cloud. Okay, so cloud infrastructure, cloud applications, consuming resources and services from the cloud is now pretty mainstream. We saw the adoption rates earlier and so on. So, what has been the tangible effect on business of cloud adoption? Well, what we find in our research and discussions with companies is that it's not what cloud providers initially touted as the main benefit, which was cost. The main thing that companies are looking forward to get from cloud is flexibility and agility. And this ties into what I was talking about with ecosystems, the ability to put solutions and systems together very quickly, relatively low cost, using third-party components and all of this. So that's one thing that cloud has delivered, and that's been very disruptive in that it allows new entrants into industries to develop competitive solutions very quickly and at low cost. Effectively, it it enables, it empowers, it amplifies the power of the startup. Okay, so that's one thing cloud does.
Yet, I think from a data monopoly perspective, it is almost impossible for any startup to compete with, for instance, Google. So you're totally right that compute power, etc., has been commoditized. You don't need VC money to buy a rack anymore. But the barrier of entry for startups that build data products, that are data refineries, the barrier of entry is almost insurmountably set by Google.
Thank you.
Why, thank you.
Thank you for that statement from someone who has worked for a company that owns quite a few data.
But let's talk a little bit more about the costs. As costs are going down everywhere, everything gets cheaper. How can the players actually survive if costs are going down? I mean, how to survive? James?
I mean, yeah. I mean, one sort of obvious counter to that argument is that as unit costs go down, so margin goes down on a unit basis, but of course the volumes go up. So companies are now more engaged in not selling very small numbers of very expensive items or products to a small number of customers, but doing what Google does and what Amazon does, selling billions of things to billions of customers at low cost, low margin. And they work on that basis. And that's partly enabled by the other shifts in technology, like cloud, coming back to cloud again. Some of these new technologies that are changing the way that IT is built and delivered are changing the economics of IT, so it becomes feasible to build a business like Amazon that's based on kind of very sort of small incremental transactions. So that's one effect of cost coming down. The other is that as cost comes down, for some of these providers, margin isn't necessarily coming down at all. So you look at the margins.
Explain a little bit.
Well, as the cost comes down of a product or service, especially one that's kind of very, very widespread, global in nature, bought for pennies, what you would have paid hundreds or thousands of euros for in the past, and that's happened with many technologies. The assumption is that the margin has also come down, and that business is inherently cutthroat and almost impossible to sustain a profitable living from. But actually, that's not the case in all situations. So some of the cloud providers are actually making very good margin on cloud services that are sold at very, very low prices, very, very competitive.
Can you give me an example?
Well, the example everyone talks about is Amazon. So the margin AWS makes on its IaaS service is a lot higher, I think, than most people were expecting once it finally started releasing financial data.
If the economics of business are changing, do we need more rules? I mean, it's like a good boxing fight. The rules are changing too. So you are from the famous Bundesnetzagentur. You are in charge of rules. What's your private opinion about that? Do we need some more rules or something?
Well, there are two parts of the answer. One is not the private one; it's the official one. There is currently a debate at the European level on a reform of the Electronic Communications Code, which is governing telecommunications regulation. And a crucial part of that is how to define electronic communication services. And obviously, whatever is an electronic communication services undergoes much heavier regulation than content-based services. Now, this was...
what does that mean, actually? Content-based services versus electronic communication. What's the difference between the content-based?
The content services, the videos, all the applications over the internet are governed by... in fact, I don't know the name of the directive, but I know the Telemediengesetz in Germany and the Telemedia Act. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
And the Telecommunications Act governs the infrastructure. And the definition is what is wholly or mainly transmission of signals. Now, currently, for the past 15 years, regulators have, on a case-by-case basis, wiggled with wholly or mainly. And obviously there is some scope for interpretation, but not too much. Now, in the discussion in the code, there is this debate about, there has been the debate about OTTs and about a level playing field, because a number of telecommunication services like telephony or SMS are challenged by applications over the internet. And you may ask the questions, why are those guys regulated heavily with regard to transparency,
Just
data
to make it
protection?
clear, like SMS is regulated, WhatsApp is not regulated.
Yeah,
Okay. So make it clear.
At least it falls under the framework.
Yeah.
Whether it's really in fact regulated or not is a different question. But it falls under the framework, whereas WhatsApp does, at least in the old days, not fall under the...
So what does it mean? I'm more protected when I send you a text message, which is unencrypted, than if I send you an encrypted end-to-end encrypted WhatsApp message. Is
Yes.
this?
Yes.
So it's interesting that basically with Signal.
Welcome to Europe.
But we are not... No. This is the old way. There is a huge debate here
But what I love about this, that in one case, use technology and make it basically impossible to intercept it, unless you go to the Americans. On the other hand, you use regulation and tell people you got to go to prison if you are wiretapping.
Yeah, but
this
you
is
see,
fascinating.
Yeah, but you know there is this Fernmeldegeheimnis in Germany, and this applies to all sorts of communication services. And for that reason, there's a huge debate about what should be subject to, for instance, legal interception. And currently, that's only bound to telecommunication services. So Bundesnetzagentur recently has interpreted Google Mail. There was a debate about what is Google Mail. Google Mail is an application over the internet. However, it's now classified as a telecommunication service, anticipating a debate that's currently taking place in Europe of having a more functional definition of what should fall under regulation and what should not fall under regulation. Namely, interpersonal communications should fall under regulation, and other things perhaps should not fall under regulation. Now, that is no longer, there's more the question, is it a substitute? Is something a substitute to the old telephony?
And the danger there is that any new application, in fact, any application running over an IP network can be used to transmit information.
Oh yes,
So
you can program a small VoIP app into any application from one day to the next.
you can do that, but even if all of VoIP was recognized and regulated, you could still use, say, a gaming server's, online chat. You could use something that wasn't even recognized as communication. You could
But
do
let me ask you a simple
steganography.
question. What is a telecommunication service? If everything is a telecommunication service, or could be a telecommunication service?
Well, this is why sort of in the past there was a strict line, and the internet has also grown to some extent with the help of this strict line. Applications were free, no barriers to entry. People like Amazon could start in the garage and become quite important. We may discuss later whether now there are barriers to entry at the applications layer, and this is what you just admitted, there are barriers to entry. The barriers in the electronic communication services come from the fact that there are networks in the ground, and networks are, there's always a debate to what extent they are natural monopolies and therefore need regulation. However, in the platform world, you have, in the first place, very low barriers to entry. Everybody can start in his garage. But then you have this phenomenon of network effects that have become so strong that even with very low barriers to entry, another garage firm can start, but they'll never be able to compete because on Moore's law, companies like Google, the big five, are on the cost curve. They are at a level where no garage can ever end.
But it's more important than the cost really is the value they have by having the data, by knowing everything about you.
But if I understand you correctly, is politics too slow for today's development?
Well, politics is always behind, and it's quite good that politics
By the way, we are
is
recording
behind.
it. You have maybe your supervisor is seeing that we are recording.
No, I think that's quite a clear. I mean, nobody can contest that statement. Politics is always behind innovation and business, and that's what we want. We want to preserve an innovative, open internet that can bring about new things without any control of government. Government can only react to challenges that come up later. We may be far too slow for the kinds of things happening now. On the other hand, with competition law, there are a number of Google cases now in front of the European Commission, and the European Commission can put fines which may even at least touch Google. They are quite high. It's exposed, but and everyone is thinking about how to change this framework. There is a debate about content, the interaction between electronic communication services and content and devices. For instance, this body that I've been talking about, BEREC, has just last week published a document on the impact of content and devices on ECS market and asked the question whether it has an effect on the openness of the internet and whether we may end up with new walled gardens like Apple, iOS, iTunes, App Store, and whether the app stores may act as gatekeepers. So regulators start to consider monitoring these markets because there is a strong interaction, and the network effects are something that's being debated. And obviously also, particularly in our country, there have been elections and, discussing about innovation across the ocean and in Europe, and etc. It's a very fashionable topic, say.
Okay, now let's go a step back. The internet was created as an open space, open structure. And if I'm looking around, I see a lot of monopolies. James, what went wrong?
Market forces. The capitalist nature of our society is the simple answer to that. But
Be more explicit.
Is it necessarily wrong, though? Is it necessarily wrong? I think that's the question to ask. Is it also necessarily a permanent state of affairs? Now, I know it's a bit of a cliche to say, remember Friendster, or Friends Reunited, or the other, I can't even remember the names now. Oh, MySpace is the other one, of course. The huge dominant social networks of 10, 12 years ago. At the time, we couldn't see the future, obviously, but they seemed, so we couldn't know to what scale, to what degree our lives and business will be dominated by things like social media, even 10 years later, i.e. today.
But is that example really valid? Because back then, Friendster died and Facebook arose. Now if something comes up, Facebook is buying it and it's gone. So there is, I think, with all the money they are making out of the monopolies, they're just buying the stuff and it's gone. So is that argument still valuable?
Yes, it still exists. I think it would be premature to say that no empire can crumble. Empires do, but you have to take a very, very long-term view to see
What is
to see that
long-term?
played out.
10 years, 5 years, 1 year? Andreas, you're always shaking your head. Do you have a different
I
opinion?
asked last year in my last class at the end at Berkeley, where I had 2 guests, one former spy and one person who is a lawyer for the ACLU.
Wow.
It was a wonderful conversation. And at the end, I asked the students whether they think the United States of America or Google will live longer. And almost all of the students said Google.
Really?
Who will outlive the United States of America.
I contest it.
Yeah, well,
Why?
Because perhaps I have some trust in competition law, but also
You have to because it's your job.
Yeah, well, I'm a regulator. I'm sector specific. We always compete
Come
to
on,
some extent.
no excuses.
But also look at IBM. We have had a competition file about exploitation of monopoly power by IBM. By the time the case was finished, IBM was dead. Basically,
But they did business mistakes. They just licensed some OS by some guy from Seattle I forgot the name of.
Let's see. Microsoft also has been a very dangerous animal. We are less afraid of Microsoft nowadays.
Absolutely, yeah.
We now have Google and Facebook in front of us, and Amazon. And there is something like merger control, which could, for instance, could check whether certain buy-ups are.
But they
in
always
line
get away with it.
competition.
Let me play Advocatus Diaboli. They always get away with it. They just, they bought WhatsApp and then they forgot to mention something. Then they got charged some million. They paid it, okay. And
Let's see. Mr. Mund, who is president of the Bundeskartellamt, has opened a file against Facebook. He also has linked it to data and data protection issues. We still don't know what's the outcome, but authorities may be too slow, but perhaps they will get sharp weapons at some point, and then they will have to will have to apply them.
And I think I think we're being sort of led a little astray by thinking of this as a binary issue, a black and white issue. Will Google survive or not? And we're not. I mean, we sort of get into sort of quite deep and scary topics talking about the demise of Google. We're not talking about Google or Facebook or Apple as a company just disappearing like that overnight and being replaced by a new entrant that happened to have a smarter algorithm. That's not what's going to happen at all. It's more likely that we see something playing out, as you described with IBM and Microsoft. I mean, remember just how absolutely and totally unassailably dominant Microsoft was 15 years ago. Apple on the desktop had what % market share? I don't know, but it was single digit, it was tiny. Linux was for hobbyists and scientists. And there was no mobile, so desktop was the only environment that existed effectively. Microsoft owned it. IBM owned the business IT environment. Those companies haven't disappeared. They're very smart. They've had to adapt and evolve to rapidly changing market and technology conditions. And I think it's a little short-sighted to say that we can imagine no scenario under which Google or Facebook would have to adapt to some very, very quickly changing nature of the way that we use these networks. Maybe it's a technological change. Maybe it's something completely left field. A scandal in a company that sends the stock price plummeting and etc. I mean, that kind of black swan event can
market
can't
forces will take care of it.
Well, that's a debate. That's a debate. I mean, when I said market forces at the beginning, that was as a way of explaining how we've got to where we are. It wasn't a way to defend how things should always be by any means. We need regulation in the same way that we'd need law. Regulation is part of law, but we need a way to codify the values that we as a society hold overall in the way that our technology works and in the way that companies work as well.
But how is that possible? We do not have a society. We have so many societies with the same companies. So who should I call to save the society?
And I think actually, as we mentioned Ali Cloud before, and WeChat, and China versus the rest of the world, I think it will become a question about whether we are subscribing to the Chinese world or to the rest of the world. Those are the questions ultimately we have. Who do we give our business to? I think it's not IBM versus HP. It is China versus non-China.
You mean Google, Facebook, Amazon versus China? Or what is it really what you are talking about?
Alibaba, Tencent. So I don't know the market cap right now, but they're all roughly comparable. Ali plus Tencent plus Baidu not doing so well compared to the rest of Huawei, compared to Apple. A number of phones sold now is pretty staggering how well they're doing. So I think we should really think about it geopolitically. And China is very much ahead of us. For example, if I may take a minute to explain an example.
You get two.
And Financial, which is one of the Alibaba group companies, has come up with a score for every citizen. It's called the Sesame score, like Open Sesame. And the score determines whether you get a certain job or not, or whether your child can go to a certain school or not.
Sounds great to me.
How is that score determined? Many terms. For example, if you jaywalk, -1 point. If you shoplift, -10 points. If you sell counterfeit goods on Amazon, on Taobao, +100 points. Because you clearly know how to do business, namely selling fake goods on Taobao. Now, I found it interesting, and actually had the chief interpreter of the US consulate in Shanghai literally translate this one because I didn't believe it. It even has terms like, are you visiting your parents regularly?
Wow.
If no, thumbs down. So, on the positive side, they actually make it explicit what values they have. They bake in that equation out of which the Sesame score emerges. 2020 is the year when it needs to roll out throughout China. On the negative side, since they know all this connectivity between people, let's say Frau Cara, or whatever, I'm not sure whether we call each other first name here. Say Clara says something, Cara, after we joked around first names. Cara says something which the government doesn't like, which of course wouldn't happen. But let's assume she says something the Chinese government doesn't like. Her score goes down. Then they know that Andreas sat on a panel with Cara. So now my score goes down too, with the remark that if I convince her to take off that pesky comment, her score will go up and mine will be restored too. So basically you now have this interconnected society where the connections are observed and get used to implement government policy. So that is just a little view on the other side of the Great Firewall.
So this is...
What is a Bundesnetzagentur? A nice reply, please. Do we like that? Would it get through your desk, a business proposal like this?
This is not so much a regulatory question. This is very
Come
much...
on, hey, Cara.
This is a very political question that
Cara,
boils down...
answer, please.
This means a dictator, your option is either we have the big five or we have some nasty government governing. Good governments don't exist, as Americans seem to believe. There is no such things as, perhaps I'm naive, or I still have some hope. Because this means the end of individualistic society, what you're talking about. There are some guys, either these big five guys who want to define der Ziel ist das, der Weg ist das Ziel, who think they are more competent in defining your goal than you are yourself. And all of this goes very much against the principles of our Western democracies. Kind of also the human rights enshrined in the American Constitution, etc. So,
is it a no? Do I get it right?
Your prospect means throw all this on the... and it brings me back to Plato. Plato ended as a dictator in Syracuse. So Plato is a very dangerous guy, even if the allegory of the caves is intellectually beautiful and has sort of inspired all of epistemology, history over the centuries. This guy was a dictator in Syracuse, after all, who felt that he knows better, and the Google guys also think they know better.
That's
and
right.
I hope that we will be able to survive this in an individualistic fashion.
So my question was yes or no. You say, I hope. All right. James, could you give me a better answer?
What was the question?
After all, start with the question, not with the data.
Good point. Well, okay. I mean, I have sort of slightly lost track of the question, but these are really fascinating points coming up. So just to respond to some of those points. First of all, this scoring system, this Sesame scoring system, sounds to me extremely brittle. like a lot of communist societies, it was founded on perhaps extremely well-intentioned and nice-sounding ideals. There's a lot to agree with in the idea, maybe not so much to agree with in the idea of this individual scoring, but ultimately they fail because they're brittle, top-down, sort of command and control types of structures that they have, as opposed to bottom-up, a much more organic approach, which is what you would have if you took Google and put them in charge of everything, which may or may not be as scary as it sounds. First of all, the difference between governments and companies is that companies are only, in theory, again, this may be a bit of a naive view, but companies are only interested in making money or making a return for shareholders. So if you keep in mind that that's their motivating force, their driving force at all points, they become a little less scary. Governments, on the other hand, are headed by personalities. You can get rogue, as we know, so rogue personalities that have their own interests in heart rather than the interests of the people of their country. If you put somebody like Google in charge, then you would have a totally different environment from this top-down brittle approach. Essentially, you would, because Google is an AI company, not a search engine, they've been that since the inception. You would start with a pool of data, and if it was designed right, it would be properly anonymized and unreconstructable, and so on and so on. Mm-hmm. And you would just learn from the data. Okay, so you would learn. I guess first of all, you would set in place the values that you want to espouse, and then you would learn the best ways to achieve those values or to implement those values from the data. Mm-hmm. And it could be, to take a little example, it could be something like learning how people drive. Okay, could be that it's actually when you look at the data and you see the patterns and the interconnectedness in the patterns, that actually it's quite different to what any government looking top-down would think. And that it could be that the optimal way to organize a transport structure and to tax and insure individual drivers and vehicles could be really quite different to the situation that we have now. Mm-hmm. So that's the sort of totally idealistic view of a kind of AI future, mm-hmm. that you give all our data to an AI. I'm not going to say overlord. I've just said it, mm-hmm. and you can identify more efficient patterns, optimal patterns, relationships that nobody knows exists at the moment.
That was a totally optimistic view.
It's not necessarily my view, but it's a view.
Okay, and what is your view?
I'm an independent analyst. I don't have a personal view.
Come on, you're British, you're not Swiss.
We're impartial. We're impartial. If you want my personal view?
Yeah.
So purely personal, a strong principle that I have is that of personal privacy.
Mm-hmm. What?
Personal privacy.
Yeah.
Privacy in American terms.
Privacy. And for that reason, I'm probably the only person, in fact, I'm absolutely certain I'm the only person in the room who doesn't own a smartphone. And
you don't?
Never has.
How do you go from A to B?
I borrow one. That's you've hit on the only thing that I have found in smartphones that is genuinely useful, and that's mapping. Mm-hmm. I think that's a fantastic
different subject, but why don't you have a smartphone? Just
good question.
Yeah. I mean, when he says a good question, that must be a good question.
Is it a financial problem? Because, I mean, the roaming charges are not that bad anymore.
No, just tell me.
You asked for a personal view, and so this is my personal view. It's an intuitive, instinctive gut feel, okay? When smartphones first came out, I thought, well, they're just kind of like ordinary phones, but I can see that they've got this extra bit in them, and so I didn't bother with them. Then the iPhone came out, and so generations of iPhones and Samsung Galaxies and so on. And I'm also very lazy. So huge inertia, until I got to the point not too long ago, and I thought, well, I really am the only person without one. Should I get one? And the first thing that crossed my mind is, well, you're permanently signed into Google or Microsoft, and even though I wouldn't do anything with the phone apart from make phone calls and use it to map my routes, I'm personally not comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm. So no emails on the go, no WhatsApp, no nothing?
No, I have nothing to hide. But it's a sort of personal instinctive reaction against something that's come into our lives very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And I use lots of other technology, and that thing that has grown so fast, it just raised a few hackles on the back of my neck. I thought, I'm not quite sure about that. It could just be it's as simple as not seeing the cost benefit. Okay, so I can see some of the cost. I can't see all the benefit apart from the mapping.
Being able to talk to other people who use WhatsApp.
Well, I also don't use WhatsApp. I'm not on Facebook. I think there are many more people who share aspects of your views. In this room, at least, there were in the coffee breaks. There is this saying, do you have to hide something? Who was it? Google boss or some? Do you have to hide anything?
Yeah. Eric Schmidt said that.
Eric Schmidt said that, exactly. Which I think is a very arrogant question. Now I'm purely personal, of course. The regulator has nothing to deal with these issues. But at least here in Europe, most of us, I think, to a different degree, have a very similar uneasiness. Some just push it away and hope to sort of cope with it in some housewife way of separating accounts, and then you realize, well, all this doesn't work anymore, etc. But think about insurance industry.
Yeah.
The insurance principle is going to not work anymore if you know everything about everyone. Would you like the insurance company to know when you crossed the red light, when you drove 130 instead of 100, etc., etc., etc.? Now, let alone health issues. Do you want, as we discussed over coffee break, if you are applying for a job, be asked whether whether you're also depressive, as your mother has been. Things like that really threaten us, and politics is there to stop that.
Okay,
and I think politics could stop that. There may be reasons to not allow certain companies to make certain money, simply because politically it is chosen not to allow them to. And in that sense, I still have some
Excuse me, ma'am.
confidence.
Is that possible? Can we, as Germany or as European Union, tell a company from California, which makes great watches, with sensors sensing, all my body functions, to not sell it and not
It
to import
depends
it?
on whether you have the principle of where it's produced or where it's sold. And if legally you change it to the country where services or
Do you think it will
products are
happen?
sold, I think it's debated. So at least the issue is on the table. It's
Okay.
not that we didn't discuss, particularly this point, because this may be the only way of somehow getting to a company that is on the Bahamas.
Okay, then let me ask you the last round of questions.
Actually-
No, just to say, because we're a little bit on a tight schedule, will digital trends change societies, or could we fight it?
What?
Will digital trends, like all the technology, will they change our societies, or can we fight it?
So
you should start.
no question that the digital trends have shaped society, the world we live in. I think we wouldn't be here without
The internet.
DE-CIX having invited us. No, I mean, without
point, yeah,
the
by the way.
digital world we're in. But what I strongly believe, and I argue for the consequence in the book which came out earlier this year, Data for the People, I strongly believe that it is not possible to fight the data creation. What we as individuals, also as citizens, should stand up for is that we get to benefit from the positive things, from the upside of the data that we create. For that, I put a few rights in, which I talked very briefly about this morning. But I think trying to say we want to stop the creation of data will not make a difference in the aggregate. But it will make a big downside for the individual to not take part in what ultimately is not a win-lose world, but which is a win-win world of the data refineries, as long as we can limit the downside.
James?
Yeah, so the question is, will these new technologies change society? And they absolutely will, but it's a qualified, they absolutely will, I think, because, take something like AI. Okay, now, a couple of points to make here. First of all is that I tend to think of AI as one of two types. One is the AI that, in some form, genuinely progresses humanity. It does something that we as individuals or we collectively can't do. Very simple example, I say simple, but an important example would be super accurate medical diagnosis, far beyond what any individual doctor or clinician can predict. Okay, so that has a real positive effect on our health, and there are hundreds of other examples where AI can do things that we cannot. That's genuinely adding something. And then there's AI, which is same algorithms, same data, same people behind it, not same companies. AI that is used to automate existing manual labor. In other words, to reduce cost, to take cost out of a company and replace it with some form of automated bot or algorithm that does nominally the same job, but in most cases that I've seen does a worse job than a human. We're just getting to the point now where in many applications, AI is just crossing the threshold where it's still worse than a human, but it's acceptable. It's not so much worse that it's unusable. So call center agents, for example, the experience, and I think we've all had this, of using an automated call center system, can work very well. I'm not denigrating it so out of hand. It can work very well, but it can be immensely frustrating, inaccurate, and error-prone, and even quite stressful.
But so can people.
If
you're interacting with a person who is incompetent or not willing to help you or just wants to get home, they can also be error-prone and all the other things you said about the AI system.
Absolutely, they can. Yeah, they can. But there is a qualitative difference between having a discussion with another person and having a discussion with a system that you can't do anything to change. You can't sidestep. You can't talk it up. You can't reason with it outside its own parameters. I mean, the call center thing is just one example of where AI is being used to take cost out. Then that has implications on the workforce and the labor force, and what happens to jobs. I'm not very pessimistic about that, by the way. I don't think we're going to see millions of people roaming the streets out of work because AI has thrown them out of the call centers and the hotels and restaurants. I don't think that has generally been the pattern of changing technology in the past. People are redeployed, retrained, et cetera. So the change that creates the perhaps initial wave of unemployment changes the business landscape, and in doing so creates new opportunities, new types of work. So in that sense, absolutely, yeah. Technologies like AI are, without doubt, going to have a profound effect on society.
Okay, Cara?
Well, of course, digitalization is going to change our society and our lives. It has for the past 10 years, and it's going to continue to do that, and perhaps even at a quicker pace, because in terms of this Moore's law, if you think about an exponential function, if you are at the beginning, it's 1, 2, 4, 8, etc., and then at some point you get to a degree that surpasses the that still has very strong scales, and in that sense, it's going to change dramatically our lives, and it's probably at least as disruptive as the invention of the printing machine was. I think societies And that's something that we have discussed also over one of the breaks. The way labor, work-life balance, all these things will have to be rediscussed. And currently, we always think about certain service industries. We hope there's not going to be a robot that's going to help us when we are old, but perhaps even that's going to be replaced. So I think there are very big challenges ahead, but there are always wonderful new inventions also that we have, that all of us have witnessed for the past years, and I'm confident we'll witness also in the future. And I still have some trust in humanity that we will be capable of, hopefully, perhaps I haven't seen enough science fiction movies,
Probably.
to preserve what are our individualistic values. And I do have some trust in governments being capable of taking action to, for instance, preserve some privacy.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was our discussion on how the impact on the new technologies, on our society, on business, how to deal with certain issues. Thank you very much for Cara Schwarz-Schilling, James Eibisch, and Andreas Weigend. Thank you.
Thank you.